Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us.
Hello everyone, my name is Luisa Hogan and I'm based in Perth, Western Australia. Thank you, Gertrude, for having me. I am 43 years old. I've lived in Perth for the last 20 years. I immigrated here from South Africa. So I was born in South Africa and moved here when I was 23 years old. I have a passion for leadership, leading change, mindset, and resilience. And I'm super, super grateful to be able to work those passions through my two businesses. I have a consulting practice named Vimelo, and more recently, I have a business called Whisper and Thread, which I co-founded with my sister earlier this year. I will tell you a little bit more about those businesses, but personally, I've consulted on long-term projects all around the world in multiple countries, in Cambodia, around Australia. I've been an executive coach. I've been an international speaker. I have had multiple executive roles as a chief operating officer, as a chief executive officer, chief development officer, and I've worked in multiple roles in those sorts of in different sectors. And I'm very passionate about leading people and helping people to be the best that they can be, and particularly about developing resilience and having the right mindset. I authored a book a couple of years ago called The Mindset Fitness Workout, which is Be Fit for Success Without Burning Out. And, my passions are in those areas. In terms of my businesses, my business, Vimelo, is about, it's a consulting practice that does change management and team resilience. And it's about, working with executives and teams to lead change effectively while also building their team resilience. And Whisper and Thread, we're a retail business, and we craft intimate apparel with personalized messages embroidered discreetly on the inside, and they are positive affirmations with the aim to increase positive self-talk in the wearer. So they're discreet whispers, they're hidden inside the garment, and the idea is that you gift them to a loved one, to your teenage daughter or to a friend or to a sister, or you wear them yourself. I have business women calling them their big business women's panties, and they wear them to give them confidence. And they're really a special and innovative design to create a revolution in positive self-talk. That's our aim with Whisper and Thread. And I'd also found out that consulting practice was going through a lot of change. It needed to go through a lot of change strategically, and it needed to change its funding mix in terms of its contracts and how many contracts that it had. And it was very dependent on one single contract, and that consulting practice had to change its funding mix and diversify to enable it to survive. So to put it this way, 90% of your funding in one contract puts the practice in a lot of risk, because if that contract folds, then there's no business for those employees in that organization. So was tasked to change that with the team. Unfortunately, a year in after I started, the CEO resigned, and I was put into that role as the CEO, and I was tasked with saving that organization. And we worked really hard as a team. We managed to change that funding mix to 60% only in the one contract and bring in a whole lot new work and a whole lot new wonderful contracts. But that all came crashing down when the funder of that 60% of our work decided to end our contract 12 months before our contract was supposed to end. And even though we had some wonderful work in the pipeline, we had some great contracts over the line, and our team had worked so wonderfully hard, my board had to make a decision on whether it was a risk they wanted to take and to continue work on our new vision and to continue look for new work, or to manage that risk and fold the organization. So unfortunately, they decided to wind up the organization, and it was a profound experience because the team that was there wound up those contracts with me. They were the most resilient team I've ever seen. They dealt with that change so professionally. They wound up all the contracts professionally. And to this day, they were the best team that I've ever worked with and probably ever will work with. And they taught me a lot about resilience. And they were the ones who inspired me to start Vimelo after that organization wound up. Honestly, I thought that I was going to never find work again, because who would want to hire a CEO who had wound up an organization? But it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me professionally, because I was able to launch Vimelo. It's been operating for 7 years. And I've worked since then with multiple teams around Australia on building resilience and dealing with change, so that they didn't have to go through what we went through at that consulting practice where I was a CEO. And, from there, I found my now husband. We tried to start a family. I went through some very difficult IVF for 4 years. We tried to have children. That was a very difficult time. Multiple miscarriages, things that women don't talk about and are ashamed to talk about. I try to talk about as often as I can to try and change that stigma. Because there's a lot of shame linked to that. Through that, we thought we weren't going to be able to have children, but miraculously, I fell pregnant with my now 3-year-old daughter without IVF, would you believe? And that has changed my whole world again in terms of professionally and what I want to do. And my sister and I, we both have daughters. We've often talked about how we want to raise daughters in a world that allows them to be all their authentic selves and to have confidence in themselves, and how we live in a world where social media and short form content is creating so much comparison, especially with women and girls, and how their confidence is shot and they have so much negative self-talk. And my sister one day said to me, wouldn't it be great if instead of leaving notes in a lunchbox that I could have these personal notes to give my daughter confidence embroidered directly in her underwear? And I said, well, why can't we? It's absolutely something we can do. And Whisper and Thread was born, and Whisper and Thread is more than an intimate apparel brand. We don't aim to be just intimate apparel brand. We want to be a brand that revolutionizes how people talk about themselves to themselves. And we want to install resilience and positive self-talk through our affirmations in our brand, so that people speak kindly to themselves, and we want to create that journey for people. So my journey has been quite erratic in that way, but it's always landed up in this one place of authenticity, leading authentically, being resilient, being confident, changing the way you speak to yourself about yourself. And I'm very grateful to have landed up in this space. And then, peppered throughout that is lots of personal stories that, that I'm hoping to share with you.
Luisa, thank you so much for coming online and sharing your story with us today. It's always brings a light to my heart when I meet another Southern African girl. So when I saw you raising your hand to come and share your story, I got really excited to share your journey with us. So you shared a bit of your challenging transition from South Africa to Australia. Can you elaborate on how those early experiences have shaped your understanding of resilience?
For sure. So when I moved to Australia, I was 23 years old, and I came here to follow love. I was very much in love with a young man who had moved to Australia from South Africa too. We had a long distance relationship initially, but I was determined to finish my degree in South Africa and come over qualified. And so we had a long distance relationship. I came to Australia. I moved here, to give you an idea, with a 1 meter cubed box of belongings. And my father built that box for me. And it must have been the most difficult thing that he had ever done. He created this box. It had to be 1 meter cubed because that's all I could afford to bring on a container ship. And he built that box for me, and he helped me, him and my mother helped me pack everything into that box so perfectly so that I could bring as much as I possibly could in that 1 meter cube. And I came over on my own, which I look back now and I think, wow, that was pretty brave to move to an entire new country. And I'm very grateful that the man that I followed here, his family were so wonderful to me and took me in. But I did feel like I didn't have anybody here personally. I didn't have family of my own. I didn't have friends. And so building that, and you would know, Africa is a wonderful place, and the people are wonderful. And the thing that I missed most about Africa was the people and the culture. And I love Australia, and I will always live in Australia. It's my home. But to this day, it's been 20 years, and I still miss the people in Africa, because they're just, there's something special about people in Africa. But yeah, so that was a challenging time. But through the years, I built my career. I was very driven. I was very motivated. But that relationship, I did get married to him, but that relationship didn't last. Unfortunately, we went through a divorce through nobody being a bad person. It just didn't work out for us. And, that was a difficult time for me, because I moved out of, I just landed my first CEO role, which is not the CEO role I described earlier. That was my second CEO role. My first CEO role I landed, and while I was in that CEO role, I also went through a divorce. And that was a very difficult time for me, because on the one hand, I was trying to be this cheerleader and leader for the people in the organization that I was leading. And I was trying to prove myself as this new CEO. And on the other hand, inside, I was going through very, personal trauma, pretty much. I'd moved out into a house that my friend had very, very graciously allowed me to live in while she renovated it, and she wasn't living in it, and it had no kitchen and it had no bathroom, and so I had no running water inside this house, and it was the back of the house didn't even have a door or anything. It was all plastic sheeting, because they were doing renovation, and I had to go out the house, out the front door, because I hired myself a porter shower and a porta potty at the back of the house. And I'd have to go out the house, around the back, and at night when I got home from a long day of work, have a shower outside, which terrified me because I was so afraid somebody would come in. So I'd have the quickest shower and then quickly run inside. The whole neighborhood could see me, going out in my little bathrobe to have a shower. And, so that was what going on. That was what going on personally. But, professionally, I was putting on this, this show that I was just in this one, that I was fine, and I was trying to inspire and lead my teams. And that was my first taste of, real resilience. I had taste of resilience moving to another country, but I had some good support. But that was the first time that I had to really be resilient in terms of bounce back from something that was really difficult on my own without the support of family.
That is just incredible. So as a young CEO who managed to complete an MBA in record time while leading an organization, what were the key strategies that you employed to balance these immense pressures?
Well, I'm a runner. I like to run long distances. I'm one of those crazy people that enjoys running a very long way for lots of time. And I actually leaned a lot on running. So I ran my first marathon at that time because, what kept me sane and what allowed me to meditate on my time and be mindful was focusing on a running goal. And, you know, running for 2 hours on a Saturday morning has got an incredible effect of clearing your mind and keeping you feeling positive. So that was really great. And also the MBA, what that provided me actually with was, at the time, provided me with exposure to a new group of friends, because after my marriage broke down, I lost all of my friends pretty much, because that's what happens when a marriage breaks down. People pick their friends, or they feel awkward around you because you're not a couple anymore and they don't know how to be your friend as a single person. So the MBA, even though it was really difficult, it provided me with a new level of support and a new social circle that I could rely on and that I related to professionally. So people may think, oh, that would add stress, but actually at the time, looking back, it actually was the thing that kept me less stressed.
Okay. It opened up a whole new world of other people who were there to support you. That's incredible. Oh, I love that. So during the winding down of your consultancy by the board, you faced a critical leadership moment. How did you manage the communication and morale of your team during this difficult time?
That's a really easy one, and the best way I could do it was transparency and authenticity and vulnerability. So, and I don't. When people hear the word vulnerability, they shy away from it because they think vulnerability means crying. Crying in front of people. I mean vulnerability as in telling my team, I don't know what to do next. I need your help. Saying I need your help is a very vulnerable thing. Saying I don't know what the answer is a very vulnerable thing. And saying I disagree and being honest about disagreeing with those people is a very vulnerable thing. And so my team, if you ask any of those, I'm still in contact with many of them today, they will say that what I offered them was a lot of vulnerability and transparency. And I let them know as much as I could along the way. And if I wasn't allowed to tell them anything yet, I would say, I can't tell you this yet, so I'm telling you the truth, but I will be able to tell you on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, you will know, and you'll be the first one to know, and I kept my word. And so by doing that, I built a lot of trust. And the trust amongst that team and the trust they had in me and the trust that I had in them created a situation where they wouldn't abandon me and I wouldn't abandon them. Okay. And that is how I led them through that situation. And it was profound, really, because just doing that, just nobody left. I mean, they all could have gone, well, since we're winding up, I'm leaving you in the lurch. See ya. I'm going for a new job. They stayed there to the end. In fact, we had to make roles redundant towards the end of that organization winding up. We couldn't do them all at once because we had to wind up, right? So even those whose redundancies came up first came back and volunteered their time to help us wind up that organization, which involved a lot of work. People don't realize you don't just shut your doors, right? There's a lot of work that goes into closing an organization. So especially of that size, it was a 20-year-old organization, so there was a lot of history there.
Wow. Well, it sounded like you had the tools to balance everything out and navigate it. Now, let's talk about facing all of these personal challenges, such as your marriage ending and living in harsh conditions. What kept you motivated, and how did you find the strength during these times?
Oh, what kept me motivated? Searching for meaning, I think, and finding my purpose, and that was very important to me. And I was kind of on the cusp, right? I thought in my early career that my purpose was to be this CEO and to get an MBA and to be a leader, right? And what I learned through that journey was none of that was important to me in the end. It is important, so it's given me lots of skills, but it was the stepping stone to allow me to find the things that are really important, which is this resilience, mindset space, and leading people with resilience, and people being positive with themselves, and knowing that when they're going through very dark times, it's not the end, it's just the beginning.
Yeah.
If they choose it to be.
It is a choice that you end up with, right?
Yeah. 100%.
I love that.
Yeah.
Trying to have a baby is every woman's dream. After moving beyond the traditional roles, you launched your own consulting practice focused on resilience and change. What was the inspiration behind this? And what are the core principles that guide your work?
That experience in that organization that I had to wind up was the purpose, the reason why Vimelo was started, because I was determined to share my story with other leaders so that they wouldn't go through what we had to go through in that consulting practice. And there were two areas. It's around leading change effectively. So in that consulting practice, I learned one of the big lessons was I was very good at bringing my team along on the change and managing change, that project, very well. But I wasn't as effective as I could have been at bringing my board along with me on leading that change and keeping them abreast with the change. I saw them less often. And so my team saw me every day and were on board with the change, but my board saw me once a month. So it was much more difficult to keep them in the momentum of change. So for me, my consulting practice is really about having tailored resilience and change management projects with the executives so that they don't go through that same experience of going through unprecedented change that we're going through now, and not leading that effectively, and also not building their team's resilience so that they're going through all of that and getting exhausted and burning out, and helping their teams build resilience strategies so that they can bounce back from challenges and continue to work like my team did at that consulting practice. So that was really the purpose, and also the principles around that practice. In terms of the current business, Whisper and Thread, as I said earlier, that's around my sister and I wanting to build a world for our women, our daughters, our sisters, where they speak more kindly to themselves. Gertrude, I see all the time, with people that as part of my consulting practice, I've done lots of executive coaching. And I tell you, the words that people have to say to themselves about themselves are so cruel. We are so cruel to ourselves. We would never say those things to our friends. When our friend goes through a horrible challenge or a difficult time, we speak so kindly to them. But when we ourselves go through those difficult times, we are so harsh with ourselves. We shame ourselves. We tell ourselves we're a failure. We tell ourselves we're stupid. It was the saddest thing. So Whisper and Thread just wants to change that. We just want to change that voice inside people's heads so that they speak to themselves as they would to somebody else that they care about.
To their best friend. That is beautiful.
Yeah.
So dealing with loss and grief. The topic of miscarriage is profoundly personal and often not discussed openly. How has your experience influenced the way that you approach this conversation about loss and resilience in your professional practice?
It's a tricky one because I'm always very open and honest about my experiences, but I have to read the room because sometimes bringing it up, people feel very uncomfortable. And I understand, women feel uncomfortable, especially if they've gone through the experience themselves. So it triggers them a little bit, so they don't want to talk about it because they have to face their own feelings around their experiences. Men feel uncomfortable talking about it because it's a woman's experience. So, talking to men around it, they also don't know how to talk about it in an open way. I try to be as open about it as I can while reading the room. So if people have questions, I'm going to be authentic and tell them honestly about what my experiences were. My husband also had a very personal experience to it too, not only through the loss and the grief, but also through the IVF process, and how as my husband, he wasn't the one going through the treatments. So the clinic that we were going through sort of treated him like an afterthought. He was just the man who stood there, And so all of the care and support went to me, but he was going through this experience too. And so, you know, there were times when we'd come home and he'd feel so helpless and hopeless and feel like I was just the accessory standing there, he would say. I was just the accessory. I wasn't part of this whole thing. And it was really difficult for him too. And so I try to be honest about those experiences because people need to talk about them. Women need to not feel shame about miscarriage, but it's interesting that we do. Yeah, that's important for me to talk about openly so that hopefully other people hear it and can also go, okay, well,
it's okay.
It's okay. And look, I'm not, to be honest, in the early days, in the first couple of years, I felt a lot of shame. I felt like my body was letting me down. I felt like I was a failure. So those are conversations I had to have with myself to change that self-talk in me too.
It's a challenge that so many women go through. Mm-hmm. So let's end our interview with 2 last questions, which are a bit of a time experiment. I'm going to teleport you into the past. Go and have a conversation with the younger you, going through all of her trials and tribulations. If I could take you back to that time, and you could go back and give yourself 3 nuggets of wisdom, based on what life has taught you up until this point, what would you say to that young woman? What would you have wanted somebody to have said to you based on what life has taught you up until now?
I would say, don't worry too much about what other people think of you. You don't have control over that. You have control over how you respond to the world. So don't worry about what other people think. Be authentically you. And if other people are offended by that, that's their choice. That's not for you to control. I would say, don't make assumptions. Don't assume what people are thinking or what people will do. Ask lots of questions first. Don't make assumptions. And by doing that, you're going to save yourself a lot of time. And the third thing I'd say is just do your best, because your best is enough. And some days your best is this much, and some days your best is this much. And both of those days are your best. Your best doesn't have to be this much every single day. And accept that is enough. You don't have to push yourself on a day where you're not feeling it to go from this to this. So that's what I tell myself.
The last question is going to take you into the future. And we're going to teleport you to meet the 90-year-old you. You're sitting in your rocking chair, surrounded by your children, your grandchildren, your dogs, your cats. If I could teleport you into the future to go and have a conversation with this wise woman who's led you to that point, what would you say to her when you finally meet her?
Well done, Mama. You raised a beautiful girl and you made a difference in at least one person's life, and you did enough.
I love asking that last question because a lot of women don't realize that the wise woman is already in them. She's that little voice that tells you to go left, go right, say yes, say no. But we don't trust ourselves enough. We don't realize we have all of the answers to all of our problems. So thank you so much for thanking her.
No worries. Thank you for making me think of it.
And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. The Her Story Circle is bringing you some phenomenal women from all over the world. We share our stories to uplift, inspire, energize, and empower you. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Luisa, thanks again for the interview.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Bye for now, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making her story.